All right, welcome back. So today's notes are going to be on the Enlightenment. This is pages 10 to 11 of your packet. Make sure you have that out. Pause as necessary, and take the notes, fill in the blanks, write what you need to in order to remember this, and use this for our next mini quiz. So let's get started. So the Enlightenment. What was the Enlightenment? Well, the Enlightenment was a period of intellectual movement that stressed reason and thinking things through to solve problems. We also call this the Age of Reason, and it really peaked around the mid-18th century, or as you might call it, the mid-1700s. So Enlightenment was really connected to the movement of humanism during the Renaissance, right? You remember that humanism said that, we're going to focus less on the realm of God and more in the realm of humans on Earth right now, individual achievement. So we're going to stop saying God did it, and we're going to more try to figure things out. Then it grew further into the movement of skepticism in Russia, which you would have read about in a previous lesson, where they said nothing can be known for 100% certain, so we should be skeptical. If we're told something is absolutely true, we should question that because there's no way to know things for 100%. Enlightenment is a continuation of that, and really is modern science coming to its fruition. So Sir Isaac Newton, as you see here in these two GIFs, Isaac Newton came up with this general theory of gravity. He came up with the basic Newtonian physics that we use today, calculus class, so a lot of the math that we use, higher level math that made the modern world possible, is all rooted in the Enlightenment because of the ideas of Isaac Newton and other Enlightenment thinkers. But we're not going to be talking about math and science. Instead, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, political theory, right? Specifically, social contract theory. So social contract theory is an idea thought up by a man named Thomas Hobbes during the Enlightenment. He was living during the time of the English Civil War. Spain was constantly threatening of invading, and things were kind of chaotic in England. And he said that before governments, we lived in a state of nature. And what is the state of nature? He said it's when everyone is free to do whatever they want, whenever they want. So in a state of nature, if you want something, you go out and get it. If you're strong enough, you can take it. If you're not, the other person keeps it. All right, so this is the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. There's no laws, there's no government. You just do what you want when you want. This is called a state of nature. Now, Thomas Hobbes said that this leads to a war of every man against every man, and that life in this is, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So in short, absolute complete freedom of state of nature is not paradise. Instead, it's more like the movies The Purge. All right, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, which means so can everyone else. So he said life is solitary because you can't live with other people because you can't trust them. They're going to take what is yours as soon as it's convenient to them. Poor because everything you have is constantly being taken by other people who are stronger than you. Nasty and brutish, meaning things are going to be kind of miserable, right? People are always going to be attacking you, or you're always going to have to be attacking others. And essentially, life is going to be very short because you're not going to live very long in a world like this. So he said this is the state of nature that existed before human beings created a government. Right? So he said to get out of the state of nature, humans will create what he calls a social contract. We agree to give up all of our freedoms to the government as long as the government keeps us safe. That's the exchange, the handoff. So as long as the government's keeping us safe, we have no other rights. The only right we have under a Hobbesian social contract is the right to be alive. And as long as the government is keeping us alive, then we cannot overthrow it. Right? So this is really revolutionary because the old way of answering the question, why do we get to be in charge, was God said so. We call this the divine right to rule, or the divine right of kings. So why do you get to be in charge? Because God said so. That's the old way of justifying an absolute monarchy. Under Hobbesian social contract theory, the same question of why do you get to be in charge is answered by, well, we the people consent to you being in charge under these conditions. So why are you king? Why is this guy right here, this cat, why is he the king? Because all the people over here agreed to let him be king. So in divine right to rule, or divine right of kings, you've got kind of God sending down an angel to crown King Louis XIV. It says you get to be in absolute control of your country and your nation and your government because it's the will of God. Under social contract theory, the king only has power because the people are supporting him. Once they walk away, the king's going to fall off this cliff. right? So this is a new way of answering the question, why do you get to be in charge? But at the same time, is it justification for absolute monarchy? So there's two ways of thinking about social contract theory. There's Thomas Hobbes, who said that people are born selfish, and in order to keep us in check, we need a strong government that's going to keep us in line, right? To stop me from going out and taking your things, I need a government strong enough to overpower me, right? Under this social contract, under Hobbesian social contract theory, you have absolutely no freedoms. The only freedom you have is to your life. The government can do whatever it wants to you in order to keep everyone in line, except take your life, right? So this is a perfect justification for an absolute monarchy that no longer requires the answer of, well, God did it, right? Why are you the absolute monarch? Why do you get to make all the decisions? Why do you get to write the laws, enforce the laws, and punish me? Well, because the people agree to give their freedoms up to a monarch to get out of that really crappy state of nature, right? So can you ever overthrow a king? Is it right to overthrow an absolute monarch? Thomas Hobbes says the only time you can overthrow that government is if that king's making life worse than a state of nature. So if your life is even slightly better than that state of nature, then you have no right to overthrow the rule of an absolute monarch. Now, about 100 years later, this guy named John Locke, right? This is John Locke right here. He came up and he was reading Hobbes' work, and he said, well, Hobbes is right? We did create a social contract to create a government, but he said we aren't born evil. We aren't born selfish. He says we're born a blank slate, that we learn to be good or we learn to be bad, or we learn to be selfless or we learn to be selfish, depending on our experiences in life. So we're not naturally bad people, according to Locke. He said that God did give us three natural rights. Whatever deity you believe in, say all human beings have three rights that not even governments can take from us, that we have simply because we're human. He called these rights life, liberty, and property. You have a right to your life, you have a right to freedoms, and you have a right to own property. The government cannot take these from you, right? He says if the government is not protecting these three natural rights, we can then overthrow that government. So a key difference between Hobbes and Locke, Locke says you can only overthrow a government if it's making life, if life isn't better than it was in a state of nature. Locke says even if life's better than it was in a state of nature, if that government's not protecting your life, liberty, and property, then you have a right to overthrow it. You see how the stage is hopefully being set in your mind for the American Revolution. All right, so let's talk about Locke a little bit more. So this is the origin of the idea that the government only gets to be in power because we said so, and it only gets to stay in power for as long as we agree to it being in power. So really, the people are the source of that government. And this is the very inspiration for the American government's idea of what we call popular sovereignty. It's one of the 6 principles of the American Constitution, which hopefully you'll learn about in your government classes. So popular sovereignty means the people of a country are the source of political power, not God, not a king. The people are in charge. And so the person in charge only gets to be in charge as long as we, the people, agree to it and allow it. All right, so this is a key revolutionary idea that led to the American Republic, the experiment that we are still carrying out today to see, can the people rule themselves, or do we need a strong leader like Hobbes said? All right, there's one last person we're going to talk about here, and his name is Baron de Montesquieu. Baron de Montesquieu was a French writer who basically was, again, thinking about these theoretical ideas of government, and he said, what is government? He said, well, government contains 3 powers. The power to write laws, say what is legal and what is not legal. The power to enforce those laws, so to accuse you of breaking a law that the government created, and to judge the laws, to decide whether or not you did indeed break the law. In the absolute monarchy, in that type of government, we call that a authoritarian government, where all the power is in one person's hands. The king gets to write the laws, accuse you of breaking them, and then decide whether or not you did break them. Right, so all those powers in one person's hand. Montesquieu said to keep a government from oppressing its people, to basically protect the natural rights that Locke said that we had, those 3 powers must be separated so that no person or group can control more than one of them at a time, right? So here you're really seeing the idea of the separation of powers, a second core principle of the American Constitution. The idea that no one person or group will be able to use more than one of the three powers of government at a single time. So the way I like to describe this is if you think about the powers of government like a sword, right? The sword is the power to write the laws, enforce the laws, and judge the laws. Well, if you put all three of these pieces together, you have a very deadly weapon that can kill people, right? It can take away your freedoms, take away your rights, those natural rights that Locke said that we had. So Montesquieu said, we're going to break that sword into three pieces: a executive branch, which we call our president, a legislative branch, which we call our Congress, and a judicial branch, which we call courts. He said each of these individually are still dangerous, right? You can still kill someone with any of these three pieces, but it's not as easy as if you had all three pieces together. So Montesquieu said we really need to break up the powers of government so that it's harder for the government to oppress its people and take away those natural rights that Locke said we had. That's all I got for you today. So 3 political philosophers that you need to know about: Montesquieu, Locke, Hobbes, social contract theory, and this idea of how the Enlightenment changed how we thought about governments, right? Hobbes created a justification for absolute monarchs without the need of bringing God into the picture. Locke evolved that idea to say that governments actually have a lot of limits to them. You'll see this, again, we saw this in our notes on how Parliament tried to limit the powers of the monarch in England. And then Montesquieu took this a step further, saying, well, here's one way we can protect our natural rights by dividing up the powers of government, and really making an argument that is the antithesis of what Hobbes said. Hobbes said all the power has to be in one person's hands in order to protect the people, whereas Montesquieu is saying, no, we need to break that power up. That's the best way to protect people. All right, well, if you have any questions, just let me know, but otherwise, that's it for our notes today.